The Aeron chair is probably the most iconic office chair in the world, with over 8 million chairs sold across the world. This chair is an infamous source of office envy, and by at least one depiction, the literal throne of God himself. It is actually crazy to me that this office chair has become an iconic fixture of popular culture, but here we are, 3 decades after its launch, still making videos about this thing. The Aeron chair is probably the perfect manifestation of what Dupree called human-centered business. Dupree, who was the head of Herman Miller, wanted to genuinely take care of his staff and customers alike. It was these core values that ultimately led to the massive success that Herman Miller has seen over the years. Now, if you enjoyed this subject matter, we actually have 2 other videos in this series, so after you're finished watching this one, go and check out those other 2 because it really rounds out the whole picture of what Herman Miller is really all about. Now, Herman Miller's apparent concern for humanity has led to innovations within the household, but the Aeron chair came out of a new focus into another part of everyday life, the office. In the 1960s, the office had a well-earned reputation as a sort of glorified white-collar factory environment. Most of us, I think, understand pretty well that office spaces typically suck, but leave it to a Herman Miller artist to paint the picture a little more colorfully. Robert Probst, former president of Herman Miller Research Corporation, once said, "Today's office is a wasteland. It zaps vitality, blocks talent, frustrates accomplishment. It is the daily scene of unfulfilled intentions and failed efforts." I mean, you can't say he didn't speak his mind. So Herman Miller set about solving the problem, but ended up creating one of the most legendary blunders in this company's history. Now, we have to understand that a company doesn't try to fix a problem simply for the betterment of humanity as a whole, as much as we would like to think.
I wish that I could bake a cake made out of rainbows and smiles and we'd all eat it, be happy.
She doesn't even go here.
Herman Miller is, after all, a furniture company trying to solve a problem with furniture so that they can sell more furniture. If all you have is a hammer, every problem starts to look like a nail. Herman Miller partnered with the rather eccentric Robert Probst to reimagine what the office space could look like. And thus was born the Action Office. Now, the first iteration of the Action Office was a massive flop. Basically, you had these high-end designers trying to convince corporate America to do something beautiful with their office spaces. They wanted wooden, handcrafted furniture, a sprawling office, lots of room to interact with others, and their own personal desk and other amenities. Do I have to explain why this didn't go well? That stuff is reserved for the CEOs. What is this? Some utopian future where people care about their employees? So Probst took things back to the drawing board to create a more compact, more financially feasible version that businesses could actually afford. They eventually settled on a system centered around these modular walls that you could move around to suit a worker's needs. He envisioned an office space where employees were free to move around, collaborate, and adapt their workspace to whatever they happened to be working on. However, inadvertently, he created one of the most notoriously constrictive tools to ever plague the working class in North America, the cubicle. See, despite Probst's insistence that these modular walls not be used to create 4 walls around an individual, corporations saw these walls as a wonderful way to organize people into tiny little boxes. Action Office 2 was so wildly successful that soon copycats started springing up as competitors. Competitors that were not so interested in the human side of design. And so we have the familiar cubicle that has plagued so many of us for so many decades. Probst was not super pleased about this development, of course, and like he usually does, he had some choice words, calling these things hellhole cubicles, barren rat hole places, which is just a little dramatic, but honestly, he's not that far off. There's a reason these cubicles have become a modern symbol of a mundane, stifling work environment. Now, thankfully, the Herman Miller legacy did not end there. From the ashes of their most notorious failure came perhaps their most celebrated product of all time, the office chair. Around the same time that Probst was fiddling with his infamous action office scheme, a new field of interest was gaining traction in the scientific community: ergonomics. This field gained the attention of one key individual, Bill Strumpf, a designer who joined Herman Miller in 1970 to work under Probst himself. Strumpf spent 10 years conducting research on how people sit before he came up with what appears to have been the first ever chair created with ergonomics at the center of its design. The aptly named Ergon was released in 1976. And since that moment, office work has never really been the same. For that first chair, Strumpf consulted people like orthopedic surgeons, cardiovascular specialists, all to understand how a chair would affect the human body. And he designed an adjustable chair with support for the spine and a comfortable foam-filled seat and back. Today, that sounds relatively normal, but back in the early 70s, that kind of rigorous research-based approach was unheard of. But largely thanks to this guy's work, it is now standard practice to have a chair in an office that doesn't suck. In fact, Herman Miller has claimed that Strumpf's comfort criteria have directly and indirectly informed every Herman Miller chair designed since 1976. There you go, buddy. I hope you feel proud, because that's a legacy. Including, very notably, the Aeron chair. When the Aeron chair first came out in 1994, nobody had seen anything like it. It's like when we all watched Lord of the Rings for the first time and we were like, we can do this in movies?
Oh my dope. Oh, wow.
You watch Lord of the Rings today and honestly, it holds up. Just like the Aeron chair. Strumpf partnered with Don Chadwick and drew on wartime technology and decades of experience to create a seating archetype that would break all the rules for what an office chair could look like. To be completely fair, those words come directly from the company's website, so we have to take that with a bit of a grain of salt. But they aren't completely wrong. Without delving too far into the boring technical details, this was a highly engineered chair designed specifically for a growing class of computer-bound office workers. These were people who were spending 8 to 10 hours a day seated, something that we really didn't know how to deal with at the time. This adjustable chair was designed to suit nearly everyone. The previous one-size-fits-all approach was just not cutting it with office chairs. However, it's not super feasible for a company to buy everyone in the office a custom-made chair. With the Aeron, you can adjust the seat height, tilt tension, arm height, arm angle, lumbar height, and more to make sure that your seat is comfortable and a healthy posture is supported. This chair does it all, baby. Get you a chair that can do both. There's like an Aeron chair like holding a fish. The Aeron also introduced to the world what designers called the pellicle. That's the mesh backing that you see on a lot of products these days. Yeah, that's a Herman Miller invention, and it did not exist before 1994. The pellicle gives a chair more flexibility to move with your body characteristics, which also keeps you cool on those hot summer days when you don't have AC, and it reduces the price. Before this invention, chairs were typically made out of foam, which was a huge part of the cost of chairs. Not to mention, super not great for the planet, so the introduction of such a lightweight foam-free chair was a win-win-win. And the great thing about this chair is that it was built to last. So people were more likely to get behind the price tag knowing that it would last them a very long time. The cult following for this chair is very real and I love it. People modify these Aeron chairs with rollerblade wheels in the bottom to make them roll smoother, and there's a whole marketplace for used parts to make repairs and upgrades when these things break down. This is like Need for Speed Office Chair Edition, okay? The chair's first of its kind ergonomic design set it apart from the market, but it is this quality and longevity that have turned it into the pop culture icon that it still is today. The people who use this chair and have been documented using this chair is crazy. Now, the Aeron chair is currently being displayed at the Henry Ford Museum of American Innovation, but it does kind of raise the question, what has Herman Miller been doing in the 30 years since the Aeron chair was released? Because from where we're sitting, it seems like all of their most notable accomplishments happened decades ago. The legendary Noguchi coffee table was introduced in 1948, the Eames lounge chair in 1956, and now the Aeron chair in 1994 may just be the last truly iconic piece of Herman Miller furniture. They used to brag about receiving almost yearly recognition from Fortune magazine as one of the most admired companies in the furniture industry. Since then, it seems some of their awards have slowed down to a trickle, being passed off to other companies like Steelcase. Herman Miller's designers used to be household names, but how many of you truthfully knew the name Stumpf or Chadwick before you watched this video? I'm willing to bet not many. Now, it seems that times are changing, and maybe we're seeing the torch being passed off to a next generation of innovators. While they might not be pumping out jaw droppers left and right these days, they haven't stopped fine-tuning their products. In the case of Aeron specifically, the most interesting thing they've done recently was incorporate the use of ocean-bound plastic into their design. Now, while this is an interesting move, there is a lot of questions about what ocean-bound technically means, and they're certainly not the first company to do this. I mean, this office chair from Fully was made with recycled car bumpers. All in all, it just feels like a far cry from the innovative moves that they were making back in the 50s. And that isn't altogether surprising, honestly. Herman Miller has accomplished what it set out to do. It improved people's lives, it discovered new ways of imagining the workspace, and it literally set the standard for the industry to follow for decades to come. Now that they've achieved this legendary status, there's less need to innovate. They can kind of continue to make millions and billions of dollars just servicing the already established market that they've dominated for years. It's like retirement. You know, they worked really hard for a long time, and they're finally gonna go relax on the beach for a couple of years before they fully kick the can. Now, we talked about in our last video how they recently acquired their largest competitor, Knoll, and have now launched Miller Knoll. They're like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles of furniture companies. I really wanna see what the editor does with that line. They're like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles of furniture companies. Now, the cynic in me feels a bit like this is just Herman Miller absorbing the competition to retain its place at the top of the pyramid. But the optimist in me hopes that, you know, this dream team will really come up with an amazing future for the furniture industry. So I guess we'll see which one is right in the coming years. Now listen, if you enjoyed this video, please remember to like it, maybe share it with your friends or somewhere online, and subscribe to the channel so that you can see more content from us. We upload every single Wednesday. Thank you so much. We'll see you in the next one. Shaplow! That's the end of the video. Why are you still here? Get the hell out of here! If the Aeron chair had a Tinder account, it wouldn't be single for more than a couple of swipes. You imagine, like, you're swiping and then you see the Aeron chair and it's like, I love eating and going for hikes and supporting that lumbar, baby. There's like an Aeron chair like holding a fish.